everybody. Welcome to the Travel Collective, and this is our third series of destinations. And today we're welcoming Adrienne, who's taking us to West Africa. So go ahead and take it away, April.
Thanks. Thanks, Cindy. So here we are. We're chatting with Adrienne, and I'm excited to hear from her about her adventures in West Africa. She's lived on 3 different continents, had 3 different last names, and her voice can be heard on at least 3 different video games. So I feel really excited to chat with you today, Adrienne. I mean, what an adventurous life you've led. So I think our listeners will be excited to hear today about your experiences. So start from the beginning. Why did you choose West Africa? How did that adventure begin?
Absolutely. So it actually began because I was in the scholarship office of my college, and I saw this thing, a little flyer for something called a Fulbright scholarship. And I was like, what's that? And the guy kind of looked at me like, you don't know what a Fulbright is? Okay. And he said, you can basically, pick a topic and just study anywhere you want in the world. And I looked at him like, what are you talking about?
Wow.
Seriously, that's a thing? And so I was like, cool. And if I had known how competitive and prestigious it was, I would never have applied. But because in my blissful ignorance, I just sort of picked up this flyer and was like, that sounds cool. I wrote an essay and I decided I wanted to study in West Africa, basically because of racism. I had spent some time in France and was really disturbed by how much racism I saw and experienced there. And I guess I had this kind of idyllic vision that other places were less racist than the United States where I had grown up, and that I would experience, a different culture over there. And what I found was that that was really not the case, and that French people were a lot of them were very racist against Africans in particular, because there had been this history of colonization and all of that. And so I decided I wanted to go somewhere where they were just as sick of racism as I was, and West Africa seemed like the place to go.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like an amazing, I don't even know how I would have chosen West Africa. I mean, what area of study then did you write your essay on to?
Yeah, so I have a PhD in theater. I didn't at the time, but I was, studying theater. And so I really wanted to study a specific kind of theater where they were taking the French language and critiquing French culture by using that language to create plays that were really politically engaged and kind of, resistance, vive la résistance. Right. And so that's what I went there hoping to find. But when I got there, it was a very different situation than what I had expected. And I think part of it is that just West Africa, it's so mysterious. It's really hard to find out what's really going on there. They're not as up on, the internet and things as we are. And so all the information you get is a little bit out of date, is a little bit behind. And because you don't often meet people who have just come from there, it's really hard to find out what's really happening over there. And so when I got there, I discovered that this politically engaged theater had kind of fallen by the wayside quite some time ago. And what was really exciting now, and was the new big thing, was this kind of revival of their traditional theater forms. And so they were doing all these cool folklore performances, getting their traditional dances back out there, getting their traditional oral tradition back out there. And so I ended up traveling around and living with a number of different theater troupes while I was there, which again was not what I had expected or anticipated, but that's what ended up happening. And it was a heck of an adventure.
Wow. Yeah. So you went, what time period was this?
Yeah, so this was 1999. And I was there through the changing of the millennium in 2000. And so I chose Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, basically because it was the most stable country in the region. For a long time, it had been kind of the only place in that area that had never had any kind of political upheaval or trouble. And so I thought I was really playing it safe by going there. And while I was there was a coup d'etat. And the power toppled. And because so they have one TV station, basically, in all of Ivory Coast. And so I was on it a lot because they don't have a lot of options in terms of, entertainment. And because I was performing with basically all the troops, they saw a lot of me.
Right.
And so I became this kind of pseudo celebrity, and I ended up performing for the president, Président Bédier. And so then when he was ousted, I did not realize this at the time, but I became kind of public enemy number one.
Ooh.
And I didn't know that at first. I was pretty naive and pretty sheltered in my little village where I had been living with this troop. And so I wrote a book about all of this, by the way. It's called Melting Ivory. If you want to find out the rest, you can
Right.
look at the book and read it. But I will tell you this little anecdote. So I was sneaking out because I was going to see someone that I wasn't supposed to be seeing. Another thing you need to know about West African culture is that it's very patriarchal. Very, very patriarchal. And so I was not used to having to live by anybody else's rules, really. I was a very independent kid growing up. I was a latchkey kid, like I think a lot of us were. I could kind of come and go as I pleased. And suddenly here I was living in this household with all these girls who basically could not go anywhere unescorted. And so I had to do that too. I wanted to fit in, and I wanted to kind of understand what they were going through. And so I kind of submitted to that same level of scrutiny.
Yeah.
And so I quickly discovered that this is a really, really hard way to live. And so I was seeing somebody and they weren't happy about it. And so I was sneaking out to see this person that I wasn't supposed to be seeing. And again, it was Christmas Eve that the coup d'etat hit. And so this was just around Christmas time. And we had made plans for me to come and meet up.
Right.
And so I snuck out of the house, and I'm walking down the street that I always walk down to go and see him. And then all of a sudden I see coming around the corner this flatbed truck full of military dudes. And they've got their AK-47s, and they've got their bullets strapped to their chest. And it was just so far out of everything that I had experienced thus far. I had been, living in this village where mangoes grow on the trees, and it was like, it was kind of paradise. And so then all of a sudden I had this cognitive dissonance that was so strong that it really just felt like I was watching a movie, like a bad movie, you know what I mean? That I would turn the channel on back home. And so I'm watching this, and they're like drinking bumse, which is this really strong kind of bathtub gin that they make over there. They're drinking it straight out of the bottle, and they're shooting their guns in the air because the military had just taken over. So these are the military guys who are like, now we're in charge of the country, right?
Right.
And so they're driving towards me, and one of them yells out, La Blanche, like the white girl.
Right.
And then another one says Adjoa, which was my African name that a lot of people knew me by. And so I'm thinking, oh, good, they know who I am. Like, everything's going to be fine now.
Oh.
Yeah. And so they kind of tipped their guns just toward me. And again, I had this moment of like, wait, what? Right. And then the guy that I was sneaking out to meet appeared, and I saw him, and I had this like, oh, I should run toward him, but no, I shouldn't. And he was kind of doing the same thing, like, come here, no, stay there, no, go. I don't know. I don't know what you should do, because he was too far away. And so I just kind of froze. Like, I just sort of was like a deer in headlights in this situation. And then all of a sudden I felt someone grab me and put me on the ground and climb on top of me. And I thought, oh God, I'm going to be sexually assaulted, like in front of this guy, and he can't do anything about this. And he's watching this whole thing. And like, I kind of put myself in his shoes for a minute and was like, this is going to be so traumatizing for him. That's how disconnected I was from this whole experience. Right. But then I realized, no, this total stranger is saving my life. He has laid himself on top of me and is being a human shield right now while these bullets are flying all around me.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And then, they kept driving because, of course, the guy who's driving doesn't really know what's happening. They're on the back of this flatbed truck. Yeah. And so and they were drunk, and I don't think they really meant to they were probably just trying to scare me or whatever. But then they just drove on, and then he got up. And I got up and I looked around and I couldn't see him. It was like he had just disappeared. And not that I knew what he looked like, but it was just very bizarre. And I still have a little bit of shrapnel in my leg from that experience. But other than that, I walked away unscathed.
Wow.
Just an absolutely crazy experience. And those dreams kind of sum up for me what that whole experience in West Africa was like. It's like you meet the best and worst people you can imagine.
Yeah.
And you just, it's just such a very different cultural experience. And just to balance that out, I'll tell you a really positive experience that I had while I was there. So I had been traveling around, in a lot of different areas, not just Côte d'Ivoire, but Burkina Faso and Mali. And so I was going through Burkina Faso, and I was in a place called Banfora. And I met this guy, and actually I might have been in Bobo Dioulasso. But anyway, I met this guy named Mr. Sissoko. And he told me, hey, I live in Bamako, Mali. And so if you're ever there, look me up. And he gave me his business card. And I was like, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Didn't think much of it, just kind of put it in my bag like you do. Well, then fast forward to months later, and I have to escape the country for that story I just told you and a number of other things. And so I'm escaping the country with this guy that I wasn't supposed to be seeing. And it really, we trauma bonded over that. But anyway, so we were supposed to stay with a friend of his. And this friend just kind of flaked out, didn't show up, was too busy, whatever. So we're stuck here and we don't have a lot of money, and we've got all our stuff, and we're like, what are we going to do? We're just kind of stuck at this train station in Bamako. And then all of a sudden I'm like, hey, I know someone.
Yeah.
Right? So I pull out this business card and I call this guy up, and he's like, I'll be right there. And so he shows up, not just with him, but his teenage sons. They take our luggage. We go over to his house. His wife has prepared dinner for us. They start playing music and do this, kind of performance for us. And we teach them some dances. They teach us some dances. They had set out this beautiful mattress on the roof so that we could look up at the stars while we were sleeping. And then in the morning, they took us to the train station, made sure we got off okay. I mean, that's the kind of hospitality that is just completely normal in West Africa.
Wow.
One of the things I remember is that when I would explain to them, hey, this is really unusual for me, this kind of hospitality. Mm-hmm. And they would explain that, in the middle of the night, for example, after dinner, they always keep a little bit of food aside, covered by a plate or something, just in case somebody shows up in the middle of the night and is hungry. Wow. Because transportation is so unreliable and takes so long that you really have to look out for each other. And they always have fresh water, ready for visitors for that reason. And so I was explaining to them that this is really unusual, from where I come from. And they were like, really? And I said, yeah, if I go and visit my aunt, for example, if I don't call in advance, and tell her hey, I'm coming, she has every right to be like, I don't have any room for you. You're going to have to stay at a hotel. And even if I call in advance, she might be like, you know what? It's not a good time.
Right.
Don't visit me. And they were like, what?
Yeah.
Your aunt? Your actual aunt? Ta propre tante? Seriously? Is she a blood relative? Yeah. No. They just couldn't believe that. That is so against everything that they stand for,
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to the women that were in the dance troupe, were they all basically from West Africa, or had some of them come from other parts of the United States and other countries?
Well, so the dance troupe that I was living with, is that the one you're talking about?
The original.
So they're all African. I was the only white girl. And that's kind of why I was a novelty, and that's why I became a celebrity, right? Because I was the only white chick. And so all these women were African. And so, yes, there's a very strong difference between, the way that the men
Right.
behaved
Right.
and the way that the women were expected to behave. And that was pretty eye-opening for me, for sure.
Were they really curious about you, the other women?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Everyone was really curious about me, and I was really curious about them. They had never met someone from the United States before. They'd met French people, but Americans were like different and exciting.
Right. Right.
You don't get a lot of English speakers in that part of the world. And so they were all really curious. A lot of them wanted to learn English, and a lot of them wanted to know a lot about American culture and what was going on. And I remember back then, I think it was George Bush who was in the office, the White House, and everyone had an opinion that they wanted to share with me about George Bush, some positive, some negative, but it was just very interesting how everyone felt like they knew a lot about American politics and wanted to share their opinion on that.
Right. So when the whole country erupted and this happened, was it your university that kind of helped get you out, or had you enrolled?
Oh, no. So the Fulbright is not affiliated with a university. It's it's kind of its own thing. And the nice thing is that we are when you are a Fulbright scholar, you have kind of diplomatic connections. You can go to the embassy to get what you need. And so I was, kind of expecting that the U.S. embassy would call all the Americans in, or that there would be some sort of evacuation, but no, they didn't do anything like that. It was very interesting.
So you really had to plan your own escape, so to speak, to get back to safety in the United States.
Well, what I actually ended up doing was going to Senegal, because that had already been part of the plan. I had planned to spend some time in Dakar, Senegal. And so I just left a little earlier than planned, basically. And so I went to Dakar, and while I was there, I met, actually, when I was in Burkina Faso, at the Theater for Development conference, I met a troupe that was from the Congo, from the Republic of Congo. And so I ended up working with them while I was in Dakar. So even though I was in Dakar, I was actually working with a Congolese troupe. So it was a truly international experience.
Right. So do these types of experiences still exist today, you think, for young people that are interested? I mean, it seems like a really eye-opening, turn of events, but ultimately a real education as far as working with these other cultures and the dance and the culture.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, even with that, the Fulbright was wonderful, don't get me wrong. Having a Fulbright is a great experience, but it is very competitive. So even if you don't get yourself a Fulbright, you can absolutely create an experience like this for yourself. You just need to make some contacts, start writing to people. And they are very, like I said, very welcoming, very hospitable people. They would love to have you. And so you can get in touch with all these different kind of, entities that are already over there, and just create an experience for yourself. It's very inexpensive to live there. I do have to warn you, malaria is a serious concern. I got malaria twice.
Oh, did you?
Yes. And I was on prophylaxis the whole time. I was taking anti-malaria medication the entire time, and I still got malaria twice.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but I was going to places, I went to the jungle. I ended up in some very interesting situations that most people will never get themselves into.
Right.
So, but yes, you do need to take your medicine, and you need to keep taking it 2 weeks after you go home, because that's how I got it the second time, is that I stopped after a week, even though they told me to do it for 2 weeks, and I learned my lesson the hard way.
Wow. Besides the malaria medication, were there other shots or things you needed to do?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Before you went? Okay.
Yes, I think I had to get about 13 shots before I left.
And how far in advance did you have to kind of start that process? I mean, it may have changed, obviously, since,
Yeah. Basically, just go to a travel doctor. They have travel doctors who know everything that you need to do and how far ahead of time you need to do it, and can help you through all of that. Yeah.
So tell us about the foods. Was that a big change?
Yum. Oh, so good. So, like I said, I mean, part of it is just that they have so many amazing tropical fruits just growing on the trees. And so you can eat, I love mangoes. And by the time I left, I was like, I don't ever want to see a mango again. I'm over that now. But like, honestly, that's how many mangoes I ate. And they have a lot of plantains and plantain-based foods. Fried plantains, boiled and kind of pounded and mashed plantains. One's called futu, one's called fufu. Depends on if you have palm oil in it or not. And they have this thing called attiéké, which is one of my favorites, which is made from cassava or manioc root. And it's basically, it kind of looks like a grain. It looks like couscous, but it's made from this root. It's a little bit fermented, so it's got that nice taste to it. Right. It almost, there's another thing you can make out of it that almost is like uncooked sourdough dough. It's very, but it's really tasty. They use a lot of different sauces, especially spicy sauces. One of the things about West Africans is that they love their hot pepper. In fact, there's a saying in West Africa, kind of like people say here, don't bother me yet, I haven't had my coffee.
Right.
They say, don't bother me, I haven't had my hot pepper yet. Yeah. So they really love their hot stuff. And in Senegal, a dish that I really love called chep, which is basically rice that's cooked with the fish so that it has that rice-a-roni, like greasy, fishy flavor kind of cooked in. And, like everything else, do it with your hands. And so one of the funnest things is like, just grab a big ol' handful of this chep rice and like squeeze it and like the oil just down your arm. It's just so oily and delicious. And it comes with like tamarind and all these little kind of toppings, and then a nice big braised fish on the top.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of delicious braised fish. In Burkina Faso, they eat a lot of chicken. In fact, I didn't really see them eat anything other than chicken and corn, just different varieties of chicken and corn. I think because it's landlocked, so you don't get the fish. Right. And so, yeah, just not as much variety in that area because it's not a good farming area. So it's tough. But they do have some delicious dishes. One of them is called yassa poulet, which is basically fried onions and chicken livers. And it's really, really tasty.
So without giving away your book, because I'm sure you go into much more detail about this whole experience that you had, and it was kind of you were just out of, college age, young 20s. Have you been back to this area, to West Africa? And
yeah, so I actually went back with my mom, of all things.
Oh, wow.
We went back in the early 2000s. And we had a cool adventure that time too, but much less scary adventure.
Right.
The two of us. Much more touristy. We saw a lot of the beautiful waterfalls in the area, and just it did a much more touristy tour than I did the first time. So that was really nice. And it was really funny because as we were on our way back, we went to Paris, and we had made these beautiful outfits. They have these lovely, one of the great things about Africa is that tailoring is the norm and super cheap. So you can get all your clothes tailored, and they use these beautiful fabrics. And so I've had several, kind of suits or dresses made, these beautiful batik fabrics. And so I was wearing one of these outfits, and so was my mom. And so we're kind of strolling, in Paris in our little African outfits. And we were the steps of Sacré-Cœur, and all these African guys who are on those steps selling their little trinkets and things, they come over and they start kind of surrounding us, and I can hear that talking, and they know who I am, and they're whispering to each other. And so one of them says, hey, I don't, mademoiselle, excusez-moi, I don't mean to interrupt, but were you ever can I ask you where you were coming from? And so I threw them off by saying we had come from Burkina Faso. And he was like, have you ever been to Côte d'Ivoire? And I was like, yes, I have. And so then they're starting to laugh because now they know that I'm catching on and what's going on. And so then apparently they had laid bets on whether or not it was really me. And so then money starts changing hands. And then somebody's like, wait a second. I'm not going to believe it's her until I see her do that dance from that clip she was in.
Oh my God.
And so I had to do the little dance that I had kind of made up for this clip that then became part of their traditional dance, the mapuka. And so everybody starts doing it along with me. And it was just so funny. And here's my mom watching this like, what am I seeing right now?
Yeah, right. She has no idea she's with a celebrity.
Exactly. It was so funny. So that was a great experience.
So you planned the whole trip back then with your mother and picked kind of the places?
Yeah. And it was a really neat experience because, like I said, I left under very strange circumstances. And so it was nice to be back and we spent most of our time in Burkina Faso, where I just was a less known quantity. And so I didn't have that, these kind of expectations on me and wasn't going to run into anybody who had, bad blood with.
Right. So for someone that's never been to this area, where would you recommend maybe where to fly into or which country might be considered still safe? Because I think just from your story, people kind of start to get a little nervous or we're not.
For sure.
We don't always get information from countries like this to know what the climate is and if it's considered safe.
So Dakar is a great city, and I really highly recommend it to everybody. They do speak Wolof there, and so if you don't speak Wolof, you will kind of be limited in your communications. But they do speak some French and some English as well, and you can usually get by okay. They have amazing food, amazing people, and it's a city that's right on the coast. And so there's all these beaches and just beautiful areas. The climate's really nice. It's not jungly as Ivory Coast. It's a little drier. And I just think Americans will probably find it a little more pleasant than a little bit further down. Also in Dakar, there's something that I think absolutely every white person on the planet needs to go and see. And it's called the Île de Gorée. And Île de Gorée is basically the largest slave-holding area of West Africa. It's right on that tip of, the furthest west tip of the African continent. And so this is where all the slaves were held before they were taken off to the Americas. And it is so powerful to be there and to experience that firsthand and to confront it and say, this is what we did. This is my legacy. And so I really recommend that to everybody. And then when you're done with that, just to kind of cleanse your palate, there's a beautiful beach nearby where you can go and relax and contemplate what you've just seen. So I think Dakar is a great place for folks to go. And if you want to go a little closer to Ivory Coast, Ghana, of course, they speak English there. And it is a relatively safe country still, although I have unfortunately heard some stories about people getting robbed and things while they were there, which is a big bummer.
Right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So you mentioned some not missed places. I think you've given some people some really good tips from a poor experience to something really beautiful that exists in a place that's, really unique. So they have a main airport in Dakar, as you mentioned? Would be where you fly
the Dakar
into?
airport, absolutely. And another thing I can recommend is as soon as you can, meet local people. It's really, really important. You will have a very, very different experience if you befriend someone who actually lives there. And they do have tour companies, and I think it's really worth your money to pay a local tour company because then, like I said, these are people who know the area well. They can translate for you. They can negotiate prices for you, which is incredibly important, or you will get gouged. Just because it's a negotiating, they haggle. It's what they do. And if you don't speak the language, you're not going to be able to haggle effectively. Right. And they know just by looking at you that they can get more money out of you. Whereas if you're with someone who's local, they can negotiate on your behalf. So I really, really recommend that it's worth the money. It's really not that expensive to get a local guide.
Right.
Yeah.
Is this a place where you could actually stay maybe? Do they have like local smaller lodgings or something where you might
Absolutely,
get more?
It's always a good idea to stay at what's called a pension, which is a kind of smaller, it's sort of like somewhere between a bed and breakfast and a small hotel, where your money's going straight to the local economy, and you're going to meet people there who really know what's going on.
Yeah.
The accommodations might not be 5-star, but they're comfortable and they're safe, and you'll meet some great people.
Right. And I think that always enhances your experience overall,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Adrienne. It was so beautiful to hear all the stories and hear about a place that's so unique and different.
Yeah.
So I think we'll let people type in any questions or comments. And
can I add one more thing? So in Côte d'Ivoire, there's also a place that I really recommend out in the west that many people don't get out to, and it's called Man, M-A-N. And it is a mountainous region, and it is absolutely stunning. Some of the most beautiful scenery I have ever seen in my life. So if you do get down to Ivory Coast, I really recommend Man.
Wonderful.
Yeah.